have a special show today. I've talked before at plenty about big tech and how big tech works together as a conglomerate to silence certain people. And I'm trying to draw attention to the alternatives wherever that's possible, and there are very few alternatives available. I've been disappointed up until the very recent times. Today, I'd like to bring somebody who's working to kind of change that. That person is Jeremy Kauffman, who is the founder of LBRY, now Odysee. Jeremy, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, I'm doing everything Sarah says. I wake up almost every morning and go to work trying to create an alternative for people to big tech, particularly YouTube and other ways that we share video. I have a background in computer science and physics, as well as an entrepreneur. I'm a father of soon to be 3. Happy family man up here in New Hampshire. And I've sort of, in terms of why I'm motivated to do this, I see myself as sort of, I had 2 great parents, but my third parent was the internet. It was learning things from people online from a very young age, and I see what's happening with literally every major platform has become at least somewhat hostile to certain types of opinions, to independent voices, and it pains me, and I want to fix it. Well, and I think we are. Yeah.
Thanks. I've talked before to my viewers every once in a while. I've mentioned LBRY, which is LBRY, .tv, and of course you have your program there for an alternative viewing experience to YouTube, where I can actually say whatever it is that I think. Like, there are major topics right now I can't even cover on YouTube because I know that I'll be banned, including topics that are actually like on Fox News. Like, there's the Hunter Biden story, which I'm not going to go into, but if I talked about it at length, I know that I'd be banned, and that's a major news story. And it's kind of shocking to me that we've reached a point where even major news we can't discuss. Tell me, why did you switch from LBRY.tv to Odyssey? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, well, so LBRY actually hasn't gone away, and it's to make the difference clear. So I'll start out by making it really, really simple. If you're just if you want an alternative to YouTube with a comparable or better user experience, with better policy, and that doesn't, want to be, a nanny and police what you're, doing to nearly the same, to the same extent, you should use Odyssey. There's an incredible roster of creators on there. We're talking about hundreds, thousands of top YouTubers have moved on to Odyssey and are making their content available. So just load that page. If you're watching this, on YouTube right now, go over to Sarah's channel on Odyssey and pick this video up over there and just try it out. And that's all you need to know, right? Mm-hmm. Now, for people who want to go a little deeper, maybe people that are a little bit nerdier, I may be one of these people. There's a technology behind Odyssey underneath it called LBRY. It's a completely open and decentralized standard for publishing digital content, specifically tailored towards videos and this kind of thing. And so the fundamental promise of LBRY, and we're not going to go deep on the tech, but you can if you want to. It's all online. The fundamental promise of LBRY is actually that we literally can't do the same kinds of things with this technology. So a creator has an identity on LBRY that they truly own in a way that is essentially unprecedented. It's the same properties of Bitcoin, that same property of no central point to control it. Your identity is the way you publish.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to make sure that we're clear and that everybody understands. What you're saying is that the protocol itself is limiting towards censorship by you guys.
Right? Very much. So you talked about you can't talk about the Biden story, right? The New York Post for 9 days has been locked out of their Twitter account, right?
Yeah.
We can't do that. If the New York Post was publishing via LBRY, their account cannot be taken away from them, the same way that you can't reach in and grab someone's Bitcoin. So that's the technology underneath it. You don't need to understand it all. You can go to Odyssey and just have a good time. But if you care about those deeper elements, they are there.
Yeah, I will say from a personal user perspective, I do notice that Odyssey is faster. It's faster to load. It's really responsive when you click around, and the comment system seems much more refined. And maybe most people, I don't know. I know that maybe you don't think that much of comments, but as someone who's actually putting out the videos, it's huge for me to be able to see what people actually think. I do read the comments. I respond to a lot of them, and that feedback is important. But I also think that, like, for a viewer to actually interact is important. And on LBRY, it didn't really work very well. It seemed, honestly, I don't mean to be insulting, but it seemed a little bit like an afterthought. Whereas in Odyssey, it's what you'd expect, right? It's got the up down likes. It's got really fast response, and they come in fast, right? So it works as well as YouTube from a technological standpoint.
You're absolutely correct. I'm not insulted. It's why we made Odyssey. So if you have used LBRY in the past and you haven't tried Odyssey yet, I do think it's a much better user experience. And we are absolutely focusing on these things. In fact, a feature you may not even know, Sarah, because it just shipped. This may be the announcement, because I don't know that we've said anything about it. Is creator likes. So now the same way. So it's a reaction only for the publisher to give on comments. So no one else can give that reaction, only you can. YouTube has this feature.
What, like the hearts?
The
right?
Hearts, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, I think that helps. People like to know. Like, I still remember when I wrote a comment on, like, Stefan Molyneux's thing, and I got a heart. It matters to people. It really does. That the actual creator, appreciated that particular comment. But I will say, and I know this isn't specific to you, but a lot of people, a lot of YouTube channels are getting thrown off of YouTube now, like in the run-up to the election. There have been a purge of, people say hundreds, but I imagine there are thousands. There are just only hundreds that we recognize, because you only notice people disappearing when they reach a certain kind of, like, size, right? When they reach maybe 1,000 or more subscribers. Small ones who are just starting out, which YouTube has a tendency to get rid of early, those people we don't even know. So most likely thousands of different channels have been purged in the run-up to the election. To me, it seems like obvious election interference. What do you think? Does Odyssey, do you have a position? Anything you'd like to say about it?
So our intent is to be as inclusive as possible. One difference with Odyssey versus LBRY, I mean, so LBRY has this promise to be, you can use LBRY and not even interact with our servers. So LBRY is designed to be this fundamental technology where ultimately the users are literally left in control. When it comes to Odyssey, our intent is to be to be as inclusive, to be very inclusive, to not do the kinds of things that YouTube is doing. There will be slightly different standards. We're still working them out because we are trying to do. We do expect Odyssey to deliver advertising as an optional monetization strategy, mm-hmm. but we expect to have a policy that certainly would be much better than YouTube's in terms of what they've done and what they've been bringing down. So,
and as a creator, I guess you could say, I'm interested in, how do you prioritize? Like, how do you get something to rise to the top in Odyssey? I mean, it's always difficult for people to find new audiences, but also for audiences to find new people who, they like. How does that work? Like, who gets featured?
So it's a mix of factors, including things like how many views your content is getting, engagement time, but also these things on like a rate basis. So it's not just pure views, it's things like, well, are they getting, a lot of views, but they're new? Are people following it? Are people liking it? All of these things. And so it's not a super succinct to be able to describe it. We also, in our case, also have the cryptocurrency. So the ways that people are tipping and supporting creators, that helps. So if you're a fan of Sarah, you click that support button and send her some. That definitely helps. And but we sort of put all those things into a mix and use algorithmic techniques to try to deliver what people want and what people are looking for. But it gets complicated in terms of how you synthesize all of those factors.
That's okay. It does seem like Odyssey does a much better job at promoting. I mean, I know that good content is subjective, but overall at pretty high quality content, regardless of whether it's independent. Like, YouTube has gone in a direction of just promoting like celebrities or the mainstream news, the very opposite of how they began. And so they actually have kind of like trying to get rid of their independent people, even when they're producing really high quality content. And Odyssey seems to be doing a much better job at, well, not doing any of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think yeah. If you load that Odyssey homepage, dig into some of those categories, and you'll find some things that are really compelling, and from some people who are in this category of up and coming. I mean, Sarah, I think you're in this category. I think you're doing very well, and I think that your audience is only going to continue to grow, and I think you're going to find that it'll be much easier to grow that audience on Odyssey, because YouTube is effectively hostile to you. So
yeah.
Was there part of that question that I didn't answer?
I think you answered it, actually.
Okay.
I did want to ask, and I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but do you think something should be done to break up big tech?
This may be an unpopular answer here, but at least I'll earn my honesty. I mean, I'm a pretty free market guy, and so I think the answer here is that, like, we can sign into other websites, like we can use other technology. I think there is a way in which these companies get cemented that could be removed, and it's actually from the government. One of the things that these platforms are able to do is shut down third-party tools that could potentially build bridges and allow this sort of extension of these. So you could imagine things like, some sort of like YouTube 2 that brings in all of the YouTube data, but like does its own algorithm on what it's going to, display to you, or like or things like this, or like layers on top of existing ones that big tech is able to fight through legal challenges that sort of shuts out competitors. And I would like to see some of that go away. But I think there are up and coming things, and it takes time for them to take root. And so I think that the situation is bad right now, but I think the situation in 2, 3, 4 years will be a lot better, because I think there are a lot of alternative platforms growing.
So you think the alternatives are a better solution than waiting for regulators to do anything, in other words?
Yeah, and I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard to regulate this. It's hard because I don't think the government is unbiased. I think if I look at the government's judgments on certain things right now, and so if it's the government's job to regulate neutrality, and then the party is in office that I don't like, how is that gonna? And now it's the government, so now it's like, it's even harder to switch to alternative. Right? At least when it's Twitter, I can log into Parler. So or Gab or wherever else. Mastodon, etc. So, I would be. I think there are things that could be done, but in terms of like quote like breaking them up, or like I think and forcing them to be neutral in particular, I think is essentially like both an impossible idea and a bad one, and one that could have bad consequences. It's
interesting because you actually have a very similar, if not the same, perspective as Andrew Torba, the head of Gab. On this whole issue. For me, I think that in the very least, you may go with this, that there ought to be some kind of antitrust action in regards to like Google and Apple doing certain things that are so obviously like kind of abuses of monopoly power. So just when they kick out certain apps out of the app stores in order to prevent an alternative, like they kicked out Gab because it's honestly an alternative to big tech. That kind of thing, I think, is so very over the line. They're also all government monopolies. Like they all receive different government funding, so it kind of goes against that whole "it's a free market" idea.
Yes. and I will concede that makes it very complicated, right? Because I think these companies are effectively able to use the government to solidify their positions, right? And so it's right. I don't believe that we're in a free market right now, so I don't think the result that we get is like what we could potentially have. And so it makes it very complicated. I'll also admit from a self-interested perspective, I don't want, why would I want the government to force my competitor to behave better, right? Like they're giving me lots of business. I want to say that like I gave my an answer I had before I started running this company, but I will also admit that like I don't want them to do it for that reason. Like they're helping me out. Like our marketing department is literally what they say and what they do.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I guess, okay, that makes sense. All right. I do. I haven't seen anything on, or heard of even Odyssey banning anything that was like political speech, anything like that. And, or even conspiracy theories. And this was really odd, I thought. The fact that YouTube has this thing where they're cracking down on conspiracy theories, like regardless of their harm. Like, for example, I don't believe that the earth is flat. However, there are people who do, and they produce all these videos, and I see absolutely no harm in it. But YouTube purged all these channels that were about the flat earth conspiracy theory. To me, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I mean, 100%. I mean, look, I'm a scientist. Okay, my background, I have a degree in physics. I love science, and I absolutely think these videos should be allowed. Look, the fact that the Earth was round was once a conspiracy theory. we're wrong about things all the time. So this notion that like YouTube can somehow be an arbiter of truth is just and any of these companies. I mean, it's just absurd. It's just flat out absurd. We are wrong about so many things. And their standard has become so high. I mean, they were taking down licensed medical doctors. You know, the standard for publishing to YouTube is higher than the standard for practicing medicine, for cutting people open. I mean, like it's just absolutely wild. And so, you know, we're never going to be, you know, we're never going to be anything like that. And I think also, I do also think that all human beings, or most human beings, get especially insane once every 4 years in November. And so like tensions are really high and people get blinded to their own biases. And I think it happens on both sides. And so I do actually wonder if they'll be a little bit less insane in a week or so. I guess it depends on who wins. They might end up more insane. We'll see. But, you know, they've certainly been wild for the last 3 months.
I actually imagine that it would get worse if we had a Biden victory, because they would assume that nothing will be done to deal with their biases. So I'd assume that they just kind of like, you know, feel better about it and work to continually prevent a Trump election, as they like to call it.
Yeah, it's plausible, and I'm not going to label myself some sort of expert political prognosticator. I will say though, there's something, and I'm not this way. I want to be clear, but I have friends all across the political spectrum, and there is something about some people on the left for which Donald Trump is just so triggering. Like people I know that like I respect these people. They're good scientists and they're generally rational, and they just go insane over him. And I think it's so odd. But it clearly happens to people. I'd like Trump derangement syndrome is real. As far as
it is real. It is. I'm glad you said that. I was going to say if you didn't.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that makes it worse is the fact that we are living in a time of echo chambers. And this is created by big tech. Like, they kick off all the people who don't align with them, and you end up with essentially what happens is radicalization. And this is a term that, like, far leftists like to use in reference to conservatives, but in truth, it happens on the left as much, if not more, that they're actually creating this situation where the only views these people hear are their own, or slightly more leftist, more radical versions of their own. Yep. And it's like, there are news pundits all the time say, well, we're living in a very polarized time. And it's like, well, if you looked at like the environments in which people live, like you've got, you know, Twitter tries to create this leftist echo chamber more and more, and then, you know, all the other people go to either Gab or Parler. And so it's like, there's no wonder we're living in alternate realities. And then they've got, of course, the mainstream media, which also is kind of creating this echo chamber where they're giving one, I guess you can say, their truth, right? Yeah. They're giving their own narratives, and that's it. So I think we need these alternatives in order to make a less divisive time, because people don't even know what the other side thinks now.
I completely agree. And I said I'm not a prognosticator. I could probably talk about this subject for like the rest of the show. I find it so interesting because I think something that's happened, and maybe social media is the underlying cause, I'm not sure, but that basically like they're used to the sort of shared narrative of the world used to be much more overlapping between the left and the right than it is now. And now it feels that those narratives have like diverged to the point that they're like borderline like not overlapping. Like they're really experiencing different realities. And we could talk about several events, from this year where like we're talking about literal video footage of the incident in question from like 6 angles, and people can look at it and experience 2 completely different things. And I know, and look, I experienced one and not the other, but still you step back for a second, you're like, well, how is this how is this possible? I think I find it very fascinating. And I don't know what's going to happen because of it. I don't know what's going to happen because of it.
Well, getting back to Odyssey, because
good. Yeah, do my job. Yeah, let's talk about Odyssey. Yeah, Odyssey is you should try it.
In what ways do you think Odyssey is better than the alternatives? And I don't just mean YouTube. I mean, when people think of YouTube alternatives, especially my audience, they're thinking things like BitChute, along with a few others that I can't remember. I know they all have tube in the name. In what ways are you better?
So I think there's better content. Compare the Odyssey homepage and the Odyssey categories to what you'll find on BitChute. And I respect BitChute. They stand up very strongly for free speech, but they've also they've embraced and established a certain kind of reputation that I think is risky for their future. Odyssey, I think, has content that's much broader appeal, much more mainstream, while still being very friendly and not excluding people from all the way on the left to all the way on the right. Everyone's welcome. I think the product is better. I think if you just like use them, you'll find that it's smoother, easier, nicer. So at that level, at sort of like today, why it matters, I think that your experience content-wise, product-wise will just be better. And I think we're on a better trajectory, much better trajectory. There's a deeper reason about this idea of library and what we're building in terms of the level of control that you can have. I think these are kinds of abstract, but I think they will end up being important in time. I think something that happens is that as these companies do get larger and they do get more corporate, like I can't promise what Odyssey is going to look like when there's 1,000 people working there. It's really hard. No one person doesn't even remain in control, even if I want a certain thing. But with library as the thing underneath this, there's this ability to like, there won't be one client. Like this is an unsexy comparison, but we're turning it into something more like email. So like if you leave Facebook or Twitter, you're out, right? You're like out of the conversation. If you want to leave Gmail, you can get a Proton Mail address, send all your friends a message and say, this is my address now. And you're not out of the conversation, right? And so that's what library does at this lower level is it turns digital publishing into something closer to email. And so in time, even if Odyssey becomes the bad guy, there's this ability, like Sarah, you have this cryptocurrency wallet. Actually, you take that wallet, all your preferences, all your settings, all your followers, all your content is there. It's yours. And so you could put it into any other system and you could keep interacting with other people on the network. Okay.
And so to put into practical terms, let's say down the line, Odyssey goes evil, right? I'm just going to say it goes like far leftist and all they allow is like trans story hour stuff. Okay. At that point, somebody could theoretically come along and create a new site called Better Odyssey. And at that point, Better Odyssey would have access to all the same videos and could sort them and arrange them and so on. Right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep.
All right. So fundamentally, I guess you could say it's more censorship free from the ground up.
Yep. Yes. I mean, library is designed to be the most censorship resistant way to publish that's ever existed.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I think we're wrapping up, getting toward the end, but I just want to say, I think that those who are watching this should know that if you're watching it on YouTube, go and get like an Odyssey account today and follow the people who are already there, the same creators. No, don't like wait until, your YouTube person disappears, because when they disappear from your mind too. There really is this like out of sight, out of mind, and you forget the people. So if you go over to Odyssey and you sign up now, and similarly, if you're a YouTube creator, you can go ahead and do something called a library sync, right? Where you bring all the videos over automatically. Is that right, Jeremy?
We do, although then this is a change since you went through it. It's now just in the Odyssey sign-up flow. So when you create an Odyssey account, if you have YouTube content that you want to bring over, you'll be invited to bring it over. So all you need to do now is just go to Odyssey and sign up, and it'll do all of that.
And if you've got hundreds of videos, that's going to save you hundreds of hours, of uploading each one and bringing over the descriptions and thumbnails and everything else. So it's something to do now. I do appreciate you joining me, Jeremy. Do you have any last words you'd like to share?
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a fantastic interview, and I hope I get to speak with you again. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you for coming. And I really think that Odyssey presents something really special. I mean, I know that you were trying to compare it with BitChute earlier, but for me, BitChute's like 480 video. I pull up these website like screenshots to kind of prove what I'm saying at various points throughout my usual videos. In BitChute, you can't even read what the text says. It's that bad. It's like I've gone back in time somewhere to like when YouTube was like considered like 720 to be super HD and stuff. It's really unusable in many ways. I spent like an entire day recently trying to get a video to upload to BitChute, and it just stayed in processing mode. So it's not the future. I really don't think it's the future. Furthermore, you mentioned that thing about how it looks on the homepage. I mean, I don't have a problem with different people with different ideas trying to reach their audiences. The thing is, with BitChute, they don't have any sort of sorting. They don't have any sort of, the popular stuff that people like go to the top. And that's why I was asking you about the way Odyssey does it earlier on, because I think that's important for us to find the non-crap. I mean, the reality is that there are like, I forget the number, I think there were like millions of videos uploaded to YouTube every day that get 0 views. They're just absolute garbage. And so it's a really important part of any video site to sort through the garbage and yet still allow people to find the good stuff, whatever's good for them. And I think you're doing a great job with that.
Thank you very much. It means so much more when you say it than when I do. And it makes me feel really good to hear that you feel that way.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. All right,
thanks,
bye-bye. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.